In with Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. And now, here are your hosts, Max Rabin and Brent Jackson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Keaton Podcast. I'm Max Rabin.
And I am Brent Jackson.
Brent, I feel like it's really tough to get in a normal business flow at this time of year. How are you doing in the middle of summer?
It's been challenging because as soon as school was out in June, we went to the after school picnic, and then 2 hours later we're on a plane down to Florida.
Yeah.
So it's been like that the whole summer. It's here in DC, not in DC, back in DC. So it's going to be that way all through summer. I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah,
way.
I'm just, my mind's in vacation mode. Like heading over here today, I was just like, I don't know. I'm just very relaxed at this time of year. And so when you're put in these intense situations, not that the podcast is too intense, but still, it's like you got to show up, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, today we're welcoming Cara Pearlman to the podcast. Cara Pearlman's with Compass here in Washington, D.C., in the Washington, D.C. area. Cara has an incredible book of business. I was looking through your home snap today. That's one of our favorite things to do, right?
Yeah.
And you crushing it out in Montgomery County, all over our suburban area here.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into all of that, but welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Just wanted to start out, actually, you have the highest sale in DC this year for residential.
So far.
The
year's not over.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to beat, though.
So tell us about that. I mean, some of our listeners might not know the transaction, the price, the location, some of the details that you can share about it.
Yeah. It was the sale of the former ambassador's residence of Sweden, and the Kingdom of Sweden owned the property. And we listed it. We found out we were getting the listing in the summertime of last year, and got it on the market late fall, and ended up with multiple offers. And it settled this year for 17.1. And it was a really interesting experience. It wasn't like anything else that I've ever had the privilege of marketing. But really the backstory on how we got the listing, I think, is the best part about it.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
Definitely.
I was introduced to someone who was looking to get in the real estate business. And our team, I was not in growth mode, was not looking for a new team member, just knowing my bandwidth. And I don't like to commit to anything if I can't really sign on and be of value. But the person that was kind of selling me on this prospect was so convincing. So I took a meeting, and I actually think I spent most of the time telling him why not to join my team and trying to help him think of other people to talk with. But after multiple conversations, there was some sparkle, something I could see, some drive and some hunger that I hadn't seen in a while. And so I brought on a new team member. His name is TJ Morton. And within a month of being on our team, he was doing all the things that new agents should do by reaching out to his sphere and meeting people for coffee and kind of politely and casually reminding them what he's doing at this point in his life. And he went to coffee, I think, with a friend of his who runs an Instagram page about where he features historical properties in DC and always takes a picture of his dog in front of the house.
Okay.
And so they happened to meet that day, and TJ said, "That was a really cool property that you posted today. Where was it?" And the conversation continues. It turns out he goes, actually, the person that runs the page, his friend, said, actually, the house is vacant. It's been vacant, and I heard it's coming up for sale. You should try to get it. And so TJ called me, and he goes, "So Kingdom of Sweden selling their old ambassador's residence at Nebraska Avenue." And I just think it shows so much about mindset, because in my head, when I looked up what it was and I saw the acreage and I saw where it was and how unique of a opportunity it was, I automatically kind of discounted that I could be in the running, or that our team could be in the running. But I try to keep a glasses half full, very positive mindset. So I said to him, "Get me a point of contact and let's try. What's the harm in trying?" And it was a completely different process. There was no face-to-face meetings. It was not your normal listing pitch. I kept saying to TJ, "Well, we should send them this brochure we did for this amazing house and show them how we customize and how we, really present properties. And TJ kept saying to me, this is like an RFP that they're asking for. Let's just give them what they've asked for, nothing more, and let's turn it in early. And so with like the help, we had all these things we normally don't need, like finance information from Compass, from New York. And it was like 200 pages, basically. We put together this whole piece. There was not a picture, not an example, nothing bragging about what our success has been. And we were
200
up against,
pages. That's a lot.
I mean, I could be exaggerating a little, but it was a very big package. And I think the vast majority of real estate agents that are far along in their career, our attention spans are probably not enough to necessarily be able to follow all of the instructions that were in it. And I really have to, attribute a lot of the success of it to the fact that TJ kind of kept saying, like, let's just give them what they want. We don't, like, this is government. This is not your normal person. And even being new to the industry, I think actually that fresh perspective is probably what helped us get it. And it's, that's the best thing about what we do. We get new experiences and we learn, or at least I think, like, I learn all the time. And so it was a really awesome story. Obviously, I don't know where to take TJ from here after selling a $17 million house, but
sky's the limit.
Yeah, it was a really great story.
Quick question on the point of contact. Like, where was TJ looking? Is he looking like on Google, Yellow Pages, like calling friends and family? Like
he reached out to the embassy and then found out that they had put out essentially what, an RFP. They had already been engaging with a couple of different brokerages, varying from residential to commercial, because it was a almost 7-acre parcel in an area where it's just unheard of. And so he got in touch with the consulate and then found out the process, and then we worked on the paperwork for a month or so and submitted it. And it turned out, I think we got an email back saying that they were extending the deadline for it. So we think that maybe we were the only ones that got it in prior to the deadline, and maybe no one had delivered on the deadline, so they extended it by a few days. So maybe because we were early, I don't know. But it was really a great experience. We did the signing in the Swedish embassy, like overlooking the Potomac River in the ambassador's office.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So once you submit the RFP, what's the next round? Is it like, all right, we've got 10, 15 RFPs. We're going to narrow it down to 2, 3.
I think they had 6 total.
6?
They didn't really publicize it. I don't know how other people found out about it. I never inquired, but they just sent us a letter, and it had all the 6 brokers that had submitted, and it said accepted, not, and that's how we found out. We got a letter.
Yeah, full disclosure, my team, I was on a group that competed for that.
Oh, sorry.
Congratulations. But the way we found out about it was through another agent at our company who was Swedish, and also sort of just, he lived in the neighborhood too, and sort of just knew about it.
Yep.
And kind of word of mouth.
Yeah.
Sort of that way. And, but yeah, we were a little disappointed to not get that for sure. But,
I think the right answer would have been like, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, right. But competition-wise, I mean, you have to think about it in terms of any listing appointment that you go on. If you're competing against other agents, if you're 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 6, your odds are going down very quickly.
Yeah.
So you even when you do have our Sotheby's branding and everything like that, we're talking about the way that this was competed for, the way that you had to present for it was very different from the standard listing presentation.
100%.
Yeah, it was totally just like by the books. This is a government doing a government thing, and this is how we want to handle it. And it was also kind of like mysterious to us, like, why would they ever want to sell this? It's a huge piece of property in the nation's capital.
Yeah, when we talked further into it, obviously they have the property down in Georgetown, and they felt like it was easier to attract people to come for meetings to Georgetown than it was so far up into DC, like in the burbs, essentially for them. And it's obviously a much more, substantial property to manage. But it was interesting because once we got to know the people that were our point of contacts, it felt like we would have, if we had had an opportunity to meet with them up front to be able to get the listing, that even like that chemistry worked so well, which made me feel better about the fact that it wasn't just paper, in the end. I think what keeps me in residential and what keeps me happy and thriving is the relationships and the interactions with people and the different dynamics. And we met some really amazing people through that process. And some of which, we were trying to arrange times because they were in Sweden. So our window to be able to have a Zoom call was very limited. But it was
Did you
interesting.
ever have to go to a face-to-face interview before getting the listing?
No, there was nothing face-to-face. Did you have anything face-to-face?
I wasn't involved in that end of
Okay.
the process, but no, I don't think there was any
No,
face-to-face.
I
It was all
feel-
by paper.
I
A
feel
paper
like
test, wow.
we followed up and
Right.
we like communicated, and we found a couple connections to try to get updates from without annoying the person that really was probably the decision maker. But there was no physical meeting at all. I think like maybe before they fully executed documents, we did another meeting just to probably make sure that we were who we said we were. But at that point, it sounded as if they were planning on moving forward.
So 17 million was the close price. What was the list price?
We were at 19 million and change, and we ended up with 6 offers with all sorts of, or actually, no, sorry. We ended up with, I was thinking of the number of people that submitted, but we had, I think, a total of 12 offers. We had a couple developers that submitted 2 different types of offers, structured differently. The really unique thing about this circumstance was most sellers, the key point is trying to get the most amount of money. And though obviously the dollar amount mattered to them, the terms and the length of time we had to get it under contract was so limiting that it really limited what offers we could even consider. We had offers far above where our list price was, but they had study periods that some were not, exceedingly long, but others were 6 months or a year. And our order to sell, I think we needed to go pending by the end of the year, by the end of 2022. And we had like 30 days or so to settle in 2023, which we ended up bumping and getting another 30 days. But essentially, they said to us, like, if we don't get this sold and settled, then we'll have to go back to Parliament and go through this whole process again to get approval. And it took us so long to get the approval in the first place because apparently there was opposition from I don't know if it's, I don't know if it was the citizens, but apparently there was opposition and there was a lot of apprehension to sell their properties in general.
Mm-hmm.
So it was unique, and I think it worked out to the buyer's advantage that we had that time constraint because that gave them a little bit of leverage at one point.
No, I'm just saying that's pretty fascinating, actually. And also just working with the institutional type seller like that. I mean, all these governments that we have here in the city can work in different ways, but it's just, they just deal with things in a very like bureaucratic, business-like manner. And then you get some people weighing in, and you never know when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So that's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really unique experience, and I'm thankful that we had it, not just because it was a great story and because obviously, like, selling a $17 million house has its obvious benefits, but I think, like I said, it's just so great that we get to take away things from all of these opportunities we get and meet new people. And it made me want to travel to go have dinner with them. And it was funny, I sent out an email to, my client base and my sphere before Thanksgiving, and we were trying to put together a cookbook of Thanksgiving recipes. And I guess it got to my point of contacts in Sweden, and they responded and gave me recipes. And they were like, we don't know how Americans are going to respond to this, and we don't really have Thanksgiving, but this is what we would make if it was ours. And so I think, like, I'm smiling now. It put
That's
a smile
great.
on my face because it made
awesome.
it more human.
Right.
And I think, like, the emotion and feeling things is kind of like what's a little bit more exciting about it. And I look forward to seeing what his recipe is next year when I come calling.
That's cool. One last question for me on the sell. Can you share anything about the buyer? Is it an end user or a developer?
It is. I mean, I think enough has come out that it's a developer. They plan on retaining the residents and probably subdividing the land.
Well, that was a lot about that sale,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate you sharing that story too, and congratulations again on that one.
Thank
But
you.
why don't we talk about you? Why don't you tell us where are you from originally? How did you get into real estate?
I'm from the DC area. I grew up in Montgomery County and went to an all-girls school, Holton Arms in Bethesda, for all 10 years.
That's a great school.
Yeah.
I love their
Nice.
campus.
It really is. My daughter is at another private school, but this year she had swimming, and so we were going to swimming meets, and then she did softball, and we were going, and like I drive on and I still get goosebumps. It's a really amazing place. And I'm thankful my parents kept me there, because I think I sell real estate. I could have gone anywhere, and I, didn't even have to go to college, which I did. But I think like my approach, my outlook, like just who I am as a person, a lot of it I attribute to those 10 years there. So anyone that's considering Holton, give it a nod.
Did you play sports there?
No.
No.
I'm competitive, but I am not athletic.
Right.
And I think I had a phase in life where I wasn't great at not being in the forefront. Like if I couldn't excel, I had a hard time signing on and continuing. So once I got out of middle school and it wasn't a requirement, I found other ways to pass time, I guess, probably not as productive or healthy, but yeah, I'm slow. I'm strong, but that's
Right.
it. So going back to how I got into real estate, my dad's in real estate at a different capacity. He has been in the DC market for over 50 years, and he buys and sells and renovates in between. At a point, he had his own brokerage in Capitol Hill. I grew up going, even if it wasn't a house he was going to buy, to renovate himself. Like we would pass time by going to open houses and talking about how we would renovate them or what we would do to it to make it different, better. And that was kind of our bonding time together. And it, like, as I got older, I found out that my grandmother was originally, I think, Mary Kay, top salesperson in Delaware, and then got into real estate and was in Georgetown, Delaware as a very successful real estate agent, which growing up, I don't know, I guess you don't really hold on to what your grandparents do for a living, but I didn't know until I really got into real estate. And my dad kept saying to me, "You remind me so much of Evelyn," because she had passed away when I was little. And so I tried not to get into real estate. I really resented it for the most part, because I saw my dad with his, this is dating myself, but his cell phone that was like in the giant, leather package.
Yeah.
The brick.
And then he had his briefcase, and he would come home late and like 8 o'clock, and he would be always in work mode and always answering the phone. And I think that, coupled with knowing where I was from my education standpoint, knowing how hard I had worked, how much money my parents had invested into my education, I thought in my mind I had to try something different. And I wanted to forge my own path, but I took a job out of college, and I was just so happy to have had one. A lot of my friends weren't having success, so I just took it. And once I was like an executive assistant, and it was for a contractor for the State Department. And so I had some interesting, like, new, experiences. But once I kind of mastered the art of what my responsibilities were, and I looked around at the office and there really wasn't much left for me to do, I was like not challenged, not excited, and they didn't seem necessarily opposed to it because they were billing out at an hourly rate for me to be there. And I was talking to my dad every day, checking in, and I said, I don't know if I need to like go to grad school, or like there's got to be something more to life than this. This is not fulfilling. And he kept saying, like, I really think you should try real estate. I really, really, really feel like you'll thrive in it. And he had had me meet with an agent before I took my job with this company, but like whatever the income was not going to sustain even a recent college graduate. So when he was pushing me to go back to it, he said I would call the agent again. It's Brad Rosansky, who I eventually went to work for. And I was like, I can't survive on that. I had just bought a house. I was like 23, and I was like, I can't pay my bills on that. And he said, you know what? I'll help you. I think you're going to thrive. I have that much faith. If you need help, I'm there for you. Just go. And so I met with Brad and took the job and sat, 3 feet away from him and listened to him communicate with his clients. At the time, he had it was a different day in the DC market, and he had a whole section of his business that was real estate owned, like REOs and foreclosures.
Yep.
And so there was a woman that was working for him that was processing all of those transactions. And eventually, a few months after I'd gotten there, she ended up leaving and relocating to a different area. And so I kind of took over that, and I was, selling a few houses a week, through him, dealing with all the buyer's agents, dealing with the corporate sellers. The caliber of the property was maybe not always so fun, but it was unique problems and solutions to work around it. It was when we still had to do hard copy of contracts and fax machines. So I would stop by the office on the weekends and make sure there was enough paper, because we would get like 7, 8, 9 offers on these homes all throughout like the PG County and further out in Virginia.
You're dealing with bank-owned properties, not short sales.
Not short sales.
Right.
No, totally different animal.
Yes.
Yeah. You have to be detail oriented on the REO. You have to have patience on a short sale. I've done a couple, and that's just a different animal entirely. But it was interesting to deal with like a corporate seller again. Like I never really connected the two of dealing with the Kingdom of Sweden, but dealing with the corporate seller and then dealing with these multiple offers on these properties that had, sometimes significant problems. Some had been renovated, but they weren't. It wasn't like I could go stop by on my way home. They were 45 minutes, an hour away.
Is this like 2008, 2009?
No, this is before that. This is probably. I started working with Brad in 2003. So by 2004, I was handling this, but it had been a big part of his business for years. I think.
So what about like your dad, right? Because if you're selling these REOs, usually you get a really good deal. Was your dad able to come in and sweep any under?
So that's how my dad knew Brad.
Okay.
By the time I had gotten there, first of all, my dad was Brad's client, really not my client. I had gotten my real estate license, but my dad was there first. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So who gets that commission on the first deal? You or Brad?
I think the ones that Brad sourced were all Brad. Right. But I in the meantime of selling these foreclosures, because there really weren't a lot in the markets that he was working in, like my dad really stayed true and still does, to various neighborhoods in DC. He'll do like a little bit in PG County, but not much. And so there weren't a lot of DC foreclosures for us, at least in our group. But I was sitting there, and in between negotiating for Brad, we were on Realtor Workstation, again, dating myself. We didn't even have like an online MLS, and I would like click a button and it would pull all the listings down, and I would just sit there a little like, it's kind of like checking your email now. And I would just wait for new listings to come up, and I would call my dad. His name is Jack. I'd call Jack and I'd say 1616 East Street Southeast just popped on. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, off-street parking. And he'd go, okay, I'm going to drive by. I'll call you back. And he'd call me back and say, okay, offer $139,000 escalating to, $151,000, settling in 7 days. And I'd write the contract up, fax it over. And I think I sold probably like 5 or 6 houses that way in the midst of the day. And
in the midst of the day?
Yeah, not in one day. I was just in the midst of doing my job.
Right.
Yeah.
I was doing this, and obviously Brad was happy because it was more sales that were coming in, so he wasn't offended by it. And the negotiations, the speed of things, just like I felt like that adrenaline rush. And then I would, Brad had a buyer's agent, and I would look over, and it was when we still had the carbon copies for the messages. And I would look over and I'd see that like she had like 5 or 6 that hadn't been called. And so I went over to Brad one day and I said, would it be okay? Like, could I call them? I don't think she wants to drive to Haymarket, Virginia. And which I don't want to drive to Haymarket, Virginia either anymore.
Yeah, certainly not anymore,
right? And so he was like, yeah, go, sure, no one else wants it. And so I started meeting people that way, and sold a bunch of houses. And, just the way I think it naturally evolves, I went from being an office person to a buyer's agent, and that was almost 20 years ago.
You get addicted to the deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Very much so.
It keeps going. It never stops.
It doesn't.
Even when we get a little jaded, we're like, oh, another one of, but you still go.
No, we still go. I think we're little Energizer bunnies all running around. I think it was interesting because Nebraska, the 3900 Nebraska sale, obviously, like, it got more publicity than any other listing I've ever had, and the sale itself got a lot of eyes on it. But I had a lot of agents say to me after that, like, oh, you can retire for the year, or like retire for whatever. And I was like, no. Like, it wasn't that I was so dismissive, but I was like already on to like what the next is, not the next Nebraska. I don't need a lifetime of, I mean, I wouldn't mind it if anyone wants to send me $15 to $20 million properties. We can do well with that. But I wasn't looking for more of that. It was like, I think that's part of what I attribute my successes to is the drive, is the like not being satisfied with one and coasting. I think there are people that, I don't know if I'd call it discipline, but there are people that are just like utilizing this career as a way to sustain a lifestyle, which is amazing because they're probably having a lot of really awesome experiences traveling and doing great things. But for me, it's like, if I do one thing, I want to do that one thing plus 10% next year. Not because I need more. Like, I'd like to pay for the private school in full every year and not have that wait. But like, I don't need another house or two. I don't need another car. It's just, if we were able to do something, I want to be able to do something plus in the future.
That's wise. I mean, I always tell people in our team or even outside our team, you can't teach drive and determination. So many agents in our industry, they get caught up on closing.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they're excited. Closing day, they're so excited. They get a paycheck. And I'm the opposite, where it's like, I get excited when we sign up a listing agreement or a ratified contract, and then it's on to the next one.
Yeah.
Closing to me, it's like, it's just part of the process. I don't get excited about closing.
No. And I think what helps mindset of that for people that do tend to go in that direction, that do tend to look at it transaction per transaction and just getting to settlement. I think if you start to put yourself on a payroll and even pay for the payroll company so that you're not counting the dollars of the transaction and you're looking at this as more of a salary, I feel like that helps shift the mindset, just as an observation.
Yeah, we did that about 8 years ago, Rob and myself. So we put ourselves on a monthly stipend. So it's not like you get the big paycheck and you take it on and go buy a car or a house. It's like, no, it just kind of rolls it forward.
Yeah.
Well, Brent, just because you get a big paycheck doesn't mean you have to go buy a house and a car every time. Okay.
Yeah.
But to your clients and the people that know you, if you get a big paycheck and you want to come buy a house, come reach out to you.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
There you go.
If it was only that simple.
Right.
So tell us about how you structure your team. You have a team of other agents and assistants?
So I went out on my own, I think about it like 9 or 10 years after being in the business.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter was a year old, and I had been recruited by a boutique brokerage in the interim. And he was like, it's really no big deal if you leave Long and Foster and you leave Brad. Like, if you can always go back. I'm sure they'll take you back. And it's really just, $60 for new business cards and a sign writer. So at a point, I finally was like, you know what? I need to try to do this on my own, because I felt like I was using Brad as a crutch. Like, I wouldn't go on a listing appointment by myself. And there was no reason after 9 years that I couldn't do that on my own. And I wasn't growing because I was using a crutch. And I'm happy I had the crutch as long as I did. But I left and I went as a solo agent and worked for a boutique broker out of Northern Virginia. And it was really great. The broker, he had a very client-centric mindset, and instead of being transactional, and really preached what we all sign up for from like our code of ethics. But he was very transparent. His website showed even the buyer's agent co-op commission so that consumers could see it. And I learned a lot of things, which at that point, after being in the business for almost a decade, was really awesome. But also, because I had been in the business that long, a lot of my buyer clients were now becoming sellers. And I went to sell my own house, and I had our sign in my yard. And I was like, I don't really love the way it looks. And if I feel that way, and I know the value of myself and our brokerage, how do other people feel? And right about at that time, Lindsay Reichman was being approached by Compass and subsequently sold to Compass. Mm-hmm. And I really admire Lindsay. And we'd had a bunch of really interesting conversations. I thought his perspective on the brokerage model was really interesting, and like really serving agents in a client mindset, helping support people that are successful without making them go out and hire a whole staff, which eventually I did, and I'll say that. But so I joined Compass in 2015, and within a year, my sister joined me and worked with me for a few years. She has since retired from real estate and now does videography and photography for real estate, and she's amazingly talented. But in the midst of that, we realized, I thought my sister would come on the way I did, be an admin and kind of learn the business that way and then go out. But she just decided that like aspects of the business really weren't appealing. She never saw herself as really wanting to continuing sales. She was great at it, but it just like getting the phone call at 8:30 at night, I don't think excited her the way that it typically excites the newer agents about real estate. Sorry.
Is she accepting new clients? I'm just curious.
I gotta ask her. She's been like a little more limited in what she'll take from me.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, well, her husband's in real estate as well, and he's a really successful agent in the area, and so I think she's got this like his group,
Little
and
niche.
she's got a niche, and it's working so far. But I'll ask her. But in any case, so she was with me, and I think it was a good transition into like learning how to delegate, learning how to communicate with someone else, not holding everything in my head the way that I think a lot of agents do. And, but we needed more like boots on the ground. So eventually I hired someone but I was really resistant to hiring a full-time agent, a full-time like support. I think the fact of like the reality of being fiscally responsible for another human being and committing to a salary was something I needed. I like really had a mental block against. And so I tried a bunch of different models to avoid that and realized in the end that was the best thing for me and the most cost effective in the grand scheme of things. I was talking to an agent in my office, Carmen, and I was saying to her, she had a great organization. She had a marketing person, a operations person. She had longevity. I was watching that her people were staying with her. And I said to her, how did you ever get over the hump? Like, how did you get past being nervous about hiring someone as an entrepreneur and just you? And she said, oh, it's simple, Cara. You just need 6 months of their salary in a bank account. Once you get to that point and you have that or more, do it. And so I marinated on it for a couple months, and like I think it was in 29. It was like COVID, I guess. So I finally I hired a recruiter, and I got my first real director of operations that was full-time, salaried, benefits, all of that.
That was your first hire?
Yeah, that's
My
after
first
all
real
those
hire.
years?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was way past the point of people like where they say, I don't know what the magic number is now, but they say like 20, 24 transactions.
Right.
I think I was selling like 40 something. And I used Compass's contract to close services for a while. But 1 year I spent $15,000 on that. And I was like, that's a lot of money that I could be, not that it's not worth it, but I wasn't that averse. And I had shown like every year my business had gone up a bit. And I was on a positive trajectory. I knew I wasn't retiring anytime soon. So like I could do it. And I think just like having the right conversation at the right time, finally it clicked. And I thought like, I have money saved. Like worst case scenario, I have to tell the person in a year I can't afford them. That's the absolute worst thing that can happen. And I can go help them find a job. I know lots of people. And that was it. And so I now have my second director of operations. My first one retired from real estate as well. Maybe that's a theme, but
Work with you and you retire early.
Gotta retire.
And she went back to school, which was amazing. But it was a great experience. She taught me a lot. And then I hired Kata, who's with me now, and she's been with me a little over a year. And then we have a virtual assistant, and who does like transaction management and drafts documents and things like that. And she's been amazing. And then we have a marketing consultant now. As the market like slowed a little bit from 2021 going into 2022, I had hired a listing marketing coordinator as a full-time, and I just realized our team didn't have like quite the volume that supported 2 full-time people plus a virtual assistant. So we have someone that just helps out with tasks as needed now. And then teammates wise, I have myself, obviously, and I'm still very much in day-to-day selling. And then I have 4 other teammates, including TJ, the one from Nebraska Avenue.
So the director of operations, like what does that job look like for your group?
She's kind of a catch-all of everything. And she's like typically always at a desk. I know some people try to like, as a real estate agent, a lot of people try to hire someone to help them, but then they send them out on the road to go do things. And I think then that kind of takes away from what the person's hired to do. In my mind, it was not just to make my quality of life better. It was really to make the client experience better, as well as having teammates making sure that they're getting value and support outside of just me, because there's only but so many hours in a day and there's only so much of me. So, Kata's, keeping track of things from as simple as our licenses and our CE, making sure like the nudging, the reminders, the things that like I'm not going to remember to do to tell everyone to renew for their DC license. Have you renewed for your DC license, gentlemen?
I'm broker, so I renewed mine in February.
Okay.
I have a whole drama story about my last renewal, but it's all taken care of.
Okay.
You probably had the same issue I had.
I was renewing for broker also, and something got lost in the
Same
system
here.
there, and then trying to get it reinstated, the system didn't work. It's like I missed one little thing, and then like months go by, but it's all fine now. But
I sat through all of the GRI classes and have taken all the education to sit through the test to do associate broker, and I haven't done it.
You'll get there. You'll do it.
Yeah.
It'll be on your bucket list for 23 or 24.
I don't know.
to be totally honest, I have my broker's licenses in DC and Virginia. I just thought it would be another thing to have, like, but it's salesperson license is fine. Like,
Yeah.
just maintaining that is okay.
I feel like that, and then when you're in Virginia and you have a group, then you have to also have the license, not additional education, or maybe that's one class, but now you also have to have the entity. And I'm not a paperwork person, so that's another thing. She does all like the paperwork stuff where I don't have the, like, even if I have the time, it's just not my area of expertise anymore, which is crazy to see how you can evolve over 2 decades. I was a checklist person. I don't know, we can ask Brad, you should have him on. But I loved being on the administrative side. I loved, like, keeping track of dates and setting up new systems. And now if I was forced to do that, like, I think I'd just go broke before.
No, I did that for years too. That's how I started off in the business too. I was working for $12 an hour for Jonathan Taylor, and he had another administrative assistant who was the most fastidious, like, detailed person, like, to the most anal retentive level. And so that's how I learned how to do everything. It's like, this is, back in the day before high-speed internet and all this stuff. So we had our files where we had a cover sheet that was pasted with a glue stick.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like
Seriously? A glue
yes.
stick?
And you would take the file to settlement.
Yeah.
It was like
the
whole
file
thing.
went everywhere.
Oh yeah.
But the glue stick thing, I'll never forget. Like, if I didn't line the corners up correctly, I would get like a
lashings.
Yeah.
Lashings. I came up with a system where it annoyed me because whoever was taking care of the files before I got to Brad's office would take the whole stack, and we had that like 2-prong whole thing at the top.
2-prong, yes.
And the whole stack of all the documents would just go on top of each other. Like, no separation of listing agreement or contract or home inspection notice or lender letter. So I took dividers, and I couldn't have them handwritten. I had to have them printed out, the little tabs on them, because I couldn't handle how all of our handwriting was different. And divided the transaction that way. And the fax cover sheets went in a section.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I mean, there's not a chance in the world I could do something like that right now at this point.
No.
So this question for both of you guys. I started similar to you, where I had everything in the 2-prong folder, and I would take that to closing. Now I don't take anything to closing but my iPhone.
I don't walk around with anything but this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys don't take folders or anything?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I mean, up until a year, probably it was COVID that forced a few things. Like, I used to get like the copy of the settlement statement at settlement or print it out, and I'd always have a folder for the year. And I also always had it on Drive, since we've used Google Drive too. And like, I think finally maybe a year or two ago, I totally stopped doing that because I was like, what am I?
Right.
I'm never going back to that folder to find the settlement statement from 2015.
On a paper version?
Exactly.
No,
That has no use.
Has no use.
So there are certain things that I have to thank COVID for helping me like stop doing.
Right.
And that was one of them. But yeah, no, I don't even carry an iPad. I just carry my phone for the most part.
Yeah. I have folders for every one of our clients inside my email.
Mhm,
So again,
same.
if I'm at the closing table, I can pull up the email and kind of scan through it. But
Yeah.
for the most part, we don't have issues with closings.
No. I mean, I feel like the hardest part about going to a settlement, because our job for the most part is done.
Right.
And it's just not talking, not interrupting, letting them do what they need to do and understand what they're signing. So it's like half the time I'm just like sitting on my hands. Being,
Totally.
Just,
Right.
just wait.
We're heavy on Dropbox. Our Dropbox stuff is pretty dense with like literally everything, photos, videos, and every other transaction thing. And I still get on my team because I'm used to that old school way of doing the file with, like, the cover sheets are over here and this.
Stick.
Yeah, so there has to be a version of that in Dropbox too.
Yeah.
I can't just have everything dumped in there poorly labeled. So that's a whole other stretch.
We have a Drive file that we break out the same way, and we have like listing, contract, photos. We have folders for everything. it's funny, the hardest thing for me to adopt and get used to is from a transaction management standpoint, like that kind of top sheet that you would have had on your folder,
Yeah.
glue sticked on. I've tried different software to track the transaction, and now we've tried to fully adopt the Compass. Compass has something called Business Tracker, and I just realized I need like the big picture visual, even if the boxes are already checked off. So I think I'm gonna have to go back to the paper because it takes up mental equity when you're worried about whether something's done or not.
Yeah.
I don't know if you find that.
No, it's
but-
like it's like when it's fragmented. So you have a transaction, you have deadlines, you have things that are fluid, and so if it's just like an outlook on the calendar and you can't see it all at once
Yep.
for each transaction, it can be confusing, especially when you're like the lead agent and you have an admin handling it,
Yep.
and you come back to it and you're like, what was that date? You need some sort of visual reference. I agree with that.
Yeah, I do an Excel spreadsheet, so it has all of our active listings and all of our listings that are pending. So I can go to it. I can see
Yeah.
like when all the contingencies expire, all that jazz.
Yeah. So that's the visual. That
That's
works.
the visual.
I used to use something called paperless pipeline, and then I just was trying to limit the number of things we were
Right.
logging into. But it did that visual for me too, similar. But the Excel spreadsheet you don't pay for, so that's nice.
Do you monitor the entire group's transactions or just your own?
No, I mean I'm involved. I think for like two of my agents have been in the business longer. One, like actually we met when we both worked for Brad, and she relocated to New York. But we became best friends in the mix of all of it. And then she and her husband moved back here a few years ago, and she came back to real estate. So I don't necessarily watch that transaction the same way I would someone who hasn't sold, houses for years. But I'm still, because my name's on it, like I'm still copied on correspondence. I'm still a resource for the teammate regardless. Like I have a teammate who is more than capable of doing a lot of these things and working through sticky situations on her own, but she will call me just to bounce the idea off and just come up with like the response. And I think that gives her comfort and makes me feel like I'm of value still, so I don't mind that.
How are you doing marketing these days? Are you mostly getting all your business through referrals, or are you still actively farming with mail, social media? Tell us about that.
So I have never sent postcards up until a year ago. I have lived in my neighborhood. I live in Lux Manor in Rockville, aka North Bethesda.
Sure, yeah.
But I eventually started sending out postcards. I think like that part I always struggle with because I don't know that I like getting a lot of junk mail. So if I feel like there's something I can send that has value, like I can get on board with it. So we've really worked to try to make something that makes sense, that maybe you can't make everyone happy, but that some people will appreciate. And but that's a long game, and I just started doing it.
So you're not doing just listed under contract
No.
and just sold flyers?
No, I don't. I mean, if we have like a really great success story, we have, if I have one little cluster of 20 something townhouses and I've sold 4 in that, I've listed 4. So like there I'll send something because they actually do know my name,
Right.
because there's not that many choices and, not that many houses. But we haven't. And I think if you're marketing and you're listing a lot in the same area, I understand that makes sense. But like for our business, because the bulk of it, to really answer your question, is referral based in our sphere and past clients. So it's not all in one zip code. If you were to look at like a heat map of our business, it's definitely denser the closer you get to DC center. But we're throughout Montgomery County. I think at this point in my career, I'm less likely to go outside of where, like, for example, like I was saying, I drove to Haymarket when I was 23. A sale was a sale. But I think at this point I've gotten wise enough to know how to leverage my time, but also to admit that the client deserves more than that. Like the client deserves a pro. The client deserves someone that really knows the nuances of the area and knows like the best dry cleaner and grocery store and why you don't want to be closer to this side of town. And I can't do that everywhere. So I think because all of our business is not in one exact area, like we're, but at any given time we'll have pending transactions in, Riggs Park, DC, a teammate has a listing in Montgomery Village under contract. We have a couple in Bethesda. So the just listed, just sold, I think would just be noise.
Right.
So I don't do that. But in terms of our marketing, the biggest investments we make are in the people that already like us and know us. And so we have been playing around with different events, trying to figure out what appeals and what works for us. Like, that's the other thing. Like, I think owning and being comfortable in your own skin and doing things that align with your value system. Like, it doesn't make sense for me to host a golf event. I don't golf, and I can't even have an educated conversation about it, And so, but if you put me in an environment like during COVID, we did an online art class, and I hired, an artist, and then I sent out boxes with, we dropped off kits for everyone with, the canvas and the paint and a bottle of wine from a client of mine who owns District Winery, and some snacks, and made it like an afternoon activity, and everyone signed on at once, and then everyone showed what their paintings were. Like, those things, that feels good to me, and that was fun to plan, and I didn't have anxiety about having to host it either. So we've been coming up with different ideas like that, trying to engage with people that we like and we enjoy being around. And outside of that, I was paying for Zillow for years. I couldn't break the habit. And I think about maybe a little less than a year ago, I finally let it go. I did okay with it when I'd connect with someone. But I found that when the phone would ring and I'd see whatever the Zillow phone number was, and I'd be in the middle of something, whether it be like as simple as being at a softball game with my kids or being on an appointment, it was like my chest would get tight. And I'm like, why am I paying money to feel this way? Even for 1-2 transactions a year, which could be great because then it could turn into a couple more. But I finally was like, I can't do this.
Well, we had Tom Kolker on the show, and he's like a Zillow professional, like right? I mean, he will pick that phone up, doesn't matter what time
Even
it is.
Here.
Like right, exactly. I don't think he does it as much anymore, but like to start his career, he was Mr. Zillow, and he would like, if he had to run across town to go do a showing, like at a random time, rush hour, that was his thing. He was like, I'm going to make the most of this. So there's like, two ways of thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, and it works. And the people that call you on Zillow don't know your history. So like, if you're new or if you're trying to get into a new market, they're not studying where, like, you're there showing them the house. So as long as they don't already have another agent, which also can happen, like, they're not studying your resume, and they're like, oh, well, they're here showing houses, of course they know what this is. Or they might think you're the listing agent, which was the other problem I had with Zillow, was that it never felt like there was like complete transparency from the consumer side. And I felt like I was spending so much time being like, no, I'm not the listing agent. If you want the listing agent, here's the listing agent's number, because I'm not that person.
And those conversations, like qualifying that buyer and trying to get them to understand things when they don't really understand what they just did. They just pressed a button.
Yeah.
It is annoying.
Yeah.
It is very annoying.
No,
but you can get better at it.
Yeah.
And get your whole spiel down. But
totally. And I think I was trying to pass it off to the team to, again, have value for the team. But I think without the confidence and without the experience, you're not necessarily as quick to pick up on the tells, because you'll have the people that do know actually that they're not calling the listing agent, and they have an agent, but the agent's on vacation this weekend, and they're just trying to get in.
Yeah.
And like, if you ask the right questions, eventually that comes out, but you don't necessarily get it in the beginning. So it just didn't seem like it was translating into value for my teammates. So we're playing around with other things that maybe aren't because the problem when you have a referral-based business is it's hard when someone comes wanting your help to then bring in another team member. I've found, at least, and there's a special art in delegating and partnering and letting the client still feel like they're being taken care of. But I think it would be nice to have some business that comes in where it's not so much driven to work with me, but just work with the team, and realizing that there's value for all of us. So we're playing around with different things, trying to figure out what else will work.
Yeah, that's always tough. I mean, I've always thought that you have to have people come in at the very beginning, at the very first meeting, because that's when people do feel like they're getting passed off. If it's like midway through the transaction, the second week on the listing, who's Billy Bob here? Why is he calling me, or why is he showing the house? So it's like, from day one, you've got to have whatever partner in crime with you at that client meeting.
Very true. It does. Like, when I reflect on the times where it's worked better, that's definitely the case.
Right.
Cara, thank you so much for coming down today. We really appreciate having you.
Thank you.
sharing your wisdom. You got some great experience too. And again, congrats on that huge sale. And sounds like I also have to mention, like, you know, like I said, we always look at HomeSnap. It sounds like you haven't had any lulls with the market, like kind of shifting a little lately.
I mean, I think it looks like that, but to us, you know, I think all of us probably have moments where like, oh my gosh, is it drying up? What's going to happen? But
Sure.
we've been really lucky. And I think when there's less going on, I just go back to the basics, which are really just staying in touch with people.
Yeah.
Like it gives me the fuel to go out and stay in touch, and staying in touch seems to just translate into more contacts, and then more contacts translate into business. So
Yep.
we've been lucky. I
Absolutely.
feel very fortunate.
Well, Brent's going to hit you with some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
5 easy questions. Here we go. And these weren't on the cheat sheet. What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
And I go to food and wine dinners. I should know this. I'm sure something when I went to Bali, but I think I've blocked it out.
That's probably smart. Yeah.
It wasn't an experience you wanted to remember.
Some mystery meat.
If you could meet any famous person, living or dead, who would it be?
Famous person. I'd love to meet Anthony Hopkins.
Okay.
Very good.
Sophisticated actor.
Yeah.
I just
I've always
watched
had
a
a little
movie.
bit of a crush on him, which is
crush?
weird. I know,
Yeah.
so weird. Probably shouldn't have publicized
Yeah.
that, but
Okay.
my husband's gonna be scratching his head.
Yeah. When did you
No.
develop this crush? Like
Yeah,
Silence of
right.
the Lambs?
I'm trying.
Yeah,
no,
that's-
no, that actually I can't even watch because it ruins it for me.
Right.
I'm like, I even hear his voice on there, and I'm like, no, the crush is gone.
But
Right.
literally, like, when I think of Anthony Hopkins, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
I don't think I've ever let myself watch the movie
Right.
in its entirety.
Okay.
Legends of the Fall, he was too old, so I don't think that was it. But I remember at a point thinking, like, I think it's his voice and his polish, and maybe it's not a crush. I think it's I don't know, not even admiration. I can't think of the right descriptive word, but I'm not a big celebrity person. I don't like, I mean, I've passed famous people and I think it's cool for a second, but like, I would never go out of my way. I would never want to impose. I wouldn't really introduce myself or ask for a picture. I feel like Anthony Hopkins might compel me to.
I like it.
We're in the middle of summer. What is your favorite season and why?
I would say up until this summer, it would have been summer. But this summer is crushing me with the heat and the humidity and the gonna have a thunderstorm. I always say I love fall in my head, and then it gets cold and it kind of loses its enjoyment. But I love the sounds of fall. I love the way it looks. I love like flying into DC in the fall is fantastic.
Yeah, that
watching
1
all
week
the
is great.
leaves. Yeah, the 1 week. And I love, even though I don't necessarily love watching football, I love the sound of it in the background. I think it just feels like home and community and people getting together. But there's something about spring when you finally hear the birds chirping that's really, really,
Everything's awake.
refreshing. It
Right.
feels like life is coming back.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Oh, totally an early bird. And I'm in bed upstairs at least with like the lights off. I might be still working but on my phone, but I'm in bed by 9 and I'm up before 6.
So this is a follow-up question to that, not part of the 5. Would you rather wake up to chaos or go to bed to chaos?
Neither.
So like, let's say you're traveling, you're in Rome.
No chaos.
Right.
No chaos for me.
So you're
Midday only.
midday.
I need to be caffeinated. I think I guess it would have to be like wake up to chaos, because going to bed, if there is too much, like some days you just have such a charged day, and
Right.
I have to like write. I take like my notes on my phone and I write out like everything that's kind of floating, just to like empty and do a brain dump. Otherwise, it impacts the way I sleep. I fall asleep fine, but it's just like a very chaotic night. So I guess if I had to pick, it would be
You waking up.
morning.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is like if you're traveling and you're 6 hours ahead or 6 hours behind, you're going to wake up
Ooh.
to chaos or go to bed to chaos. It's like, do you go to
Yeah.
Hawaii or do you go to Rome?
No, I would say I would wake up. I would rather, if I was traveling, I'd rather wake up to it than go
Right.
to bed feeling
Right.
that way.
Sounds like something chaotic happened while you were in London.
I would say so.
Maybe. But it's not about me.
Right.
Last question here. Are you binge watching anything?
This is really a guilty pleasure. It's a little disturbing. There's a show, which I just found out was Johnny Depp's daughter. It's called The Idol. And my husband kind of like forced me to watch it with him. And by forced, I mean it was what he put on and I wasn't leaving the room. But I think it was like 5 episodes. It was a little dark. not necessarily like in my normal wheelhouse. I like to watch things that make me feel good. So the Hot Cheetos story, I don't know if that's actually the name of it. I think it's on Hulu, but it's about how the Frito-Lay company had an employee, and he realized he was a janitor and then like kind of a tinkering engineer for the machines. And he realized that there was an underrepresented population. And so he was, I can't remember if he was Mexican or somewhere from Central America, but he realized there was no spicy anything in the chip products. And so he came up with the spice mix and found a way to get to like the head of Frito, which is the head of Pepsi, and like this great success story. So that was good. It wasn't really a binge watching because it was a movie, but that I recommend, and that makes you feel good, and everyone loves a good success story.
So I guess he had that trademarked, whatever that spice was.
I mean, he ended up, I don't know if he got to trademark it or if it just went under the Frito hub, but he ended up being promoted to like a real office corporate job, and ended up with a really long, nice, wonderful career where he totally realized there was a segment of the market that was not represented at all. And but I don't know if he got the trademark on the flavor. I don't know. That might have gone straight to the chip company.
You'll have to do the next documentary and go deeper.
Yes, if there's only a follow-up.
Yeah.
But it was good. I suggest that.
Cara Pearlman, thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you.
We're really big on charity here at the Keyed In podcast. Is there any charity that you'd like to give a shout out to today?
So we always support Habitat for Humanity. I actually participate in Women's Build Week and sponsor a Build Day. So I would say Habitat for Humanity, and we've recently done work with the Napkin Network. So those are my two to shout out.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Keyed In with your hosts, Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. For more information on selling your home, find us online at keyedinpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Keyed In on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Keyed In Podcast, at Rabin Max, and at Brent E. Jackson. And follow Max on TikTok at MaxwellRabin_properties.